This is Kent Mulgat with KelownaNow, joined by Matt Worona, the City of Kelowna's Active Transportation Coordinator. I like that title, Active.
It's great. It's really fun.
You've been in it, 6 months or so now? Something like that?
Yeah, closer to 8 months, but yeah, not too long.
So active means that this is non-motorized kinds of transportation is your area?
Yeah, so typically it's kind of planning pedestrian and cycling facilities. We see a lot of those going in these days, but it's also the program side. So whether it's different ways to get to your car, those things are kind of part of it too.
Right, and the big thing on the agenda now is this bike sharing program. Bike Drop, I guess, is the company. Drop Bike. And so tell me where it's at now.
So yesterday we got the agreement approved by Kelowna City Council. So it's off to the races. Now we get to start planning. We're asking the public to help us kind of with input, but we're anticipating a launch for spring of this year, which is pretty soon.
Right. So I take it from our earlier discussion that this isn't something that you need to budget for? It's a no-cost item?
This doesn't cost the municipality any money, and it's a pilot, so it's a kind of see how it goes kind of situation.
Right. I've seen different media reports on this with as few as 500 bikes, 1,500 bikes, 1,200 bikes. Are these just unknowns?
We just wanted to give the operator a range. There's probably going to be more demand for this in the summer, and they might want to scale back in the wintertime. There's a lot of flexibility that can kind of come within that range, but between 500 to 1,500, it's still kind of within the same level of magnitude.
Right.
So we're looking at kind of what works for the operator, what works for the city, and trying to kind of balance all those needs.
So how does it work? There are certain places where I would see one of these bikes and be able to take one. Tell me how the program works.
So essentially, there are bikes, and if you've kind of tried bike share in a Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto context, they're typically kind of attached to these dock mechanisms. And with this new technology, those dock mechanisms go away, and we kind of rely on your GPS and your smart software solutions to try to maintain order that the dock's kind of created. So essentially, you'll have locations within the city where users are incentivized to kind of end their trips, and those end up being kind of places where you're anticipating bikes to be. So if you know that there's a haven right around the corner, you can grab a bike, unlock it with your smartphone, ride to your end destination, and hopefully you'll kind of think about, oh, there's a haven just around the corner, I'm going to park it there.
Right. Or you could just leave it outside of wherever you might be, but that would maybe cost more. Like there's a financial incentive to returning it to one of these havens.
Yeah, it's pretty clever. Essentially, if you were to park it outside of one of these locations, there's kind of an additional kind of penalty fee, and that penalty fee gets converted into a bounty. So if you drop one outside of a haven, I could walk by, see that there's a bike outside of one, and realize, hey, if I just bring this back to a haven, might be 100 meters away, then I actually get a credit on my account.
Wow, that's a great idea. Is what protects the company from having people just keep on riding all the way, to steal the bike?
Yeah, so there's GPS on board the bike. Our own RCMP in the Okanagan, we do a program called Bait Bikes. So we have a nice bike, and we put a GPS unit on it, and then we figure out where it goes after it gets stolen, and we go and kind of find those guys. Essentially, this is a large-scale system with the same kind of implements. So if you do kind of not unlock a bike, and you kind of throw it in your pickup, we know exactly where it is, and it's very difficult to take off the GPS unit from the bicycle. So it's fairly easy to kind of get those bikes back, and I think there'll be a little bit of a learning curve at the beginning, but for the most part, in other cities, this is not really a problem.
And plus, this is something that the company involved would have to deal with. If there were some losses, and they can work on making their protection programs better.
Exactly. Yeah,
right.
It's not the city's responsibility.
So, what sort of demand do you expect for these? Are the public saying that they want this?
Yeah, we're really excited about what this can mean. A lot of people, when they think about bike share, they see it in other cities and think, hey, that's a great thing for tourists. But they don't realize that there's a really huge value for people to make short trips, especially in a mid-sized city that's a little bit more spread out. some of those trips just aren't really reasonable within a walking distance, and it's going to extend that ability for people to make a little bit further of a trip.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of applications, and I really am interested in kind of seeing how it plays out in Kelowna.
Right. I guess that's one of the things you'd be finding out. This is a pilot for the first year, right?
For the first 18 months or so.
So I guess it's too early to ask how much the public's going to like it. I guess that's one of the things you're going to find out.
Absolutely.
From some of the discussion I heard coming out of City Council, it sounded like some people thought, wait a minute, that's too centralized. Why isn't it in Rutland? Why isn't it way out in the Mission? This sort of thing. Is that the kind of thing that you'll also be feeling out? And why such a focus downtown?
So we focused on the downtown just because it kind of made sense for the agreement. We had to kind of set up some initial locations and an initial service area, and then we grow from there. So the city still retains the ability to add and remove havens, expand and contract a service area. So essentially, we can try Rutland, we can try Glenmore, we can try the Mission, all these different places, and just see what sticks, essentially. But what we didn't want to do was plan an entire system, because we're not going to be very good at that, and it would kind of rid the program of some kind of organic growth where we can kind of learn as we grow.
Right. And I would think that the company doing it and the city would probably be on the same page, because the company's not going to want to put it into places where there isn't much demand, and the city would want it where there's demand. So I don't see a whole lot of disparate kind of...
It's really nice. Their incentives are kind of more people riding bikes is good for them, and for the city we kind of see it in the same regard.
Now I think in some cities they can make revenue from this, but in this case, was it the city of Kelowna that reached out to this company to make this happen here?
We reached out to quite a few companies. There's quite a few people or companies in the dockless bike share space right now. And we found that kind of within what we were comfortable with, Drop Bike, this company, was the one willing to kind of make all those concessions and help us kind of understand what this will look like in the Kelowna context without giving away too much control too early.
Right. Ultimately, I suppose, given, I guess depending on how successful it is, it could be something it actually is a revenue generator for the city?
Possibly.
But that's not planned for at this point.
At this point, we don't know what's going to happen after the pilot. It truly is a pilot. It's not one of those, it's a pilot because it's politically expedient. It's a pilot because this is really, really new, and we're trying to figure out what it actually looks like. So right now, we don't know what's going to happen, what side of the fence we're going to land on, whether we'll have a bike share in 2 years or not. But we do know that this is something we want to try, and it's something that's coming up more and more, where technology is kind of jumping into the transportation game and changing our initial assumptions and changing what we can provide to our citizens, which is really exciting.
Right. I think I was reading something that you wrote about disruptive transportation, right? This is something that is sort of disrupting our normal ideas and expectations about transportation, like a real game changer.
Absolutely.
Perhaps.
Yeah, and it's just one of those kind of little pieces. So this kind of bike share where it can be deployed easily is really, really instrumental. And we didn't see this coming even a year ago, essentially. This was only in China, and it was growing really fast there, but we didn't have any kind of context. Now we're seeing it pop up really, really quickly in North American cities, and we're seeing the same thing with the deployment of Uber and people talking about self-driving vehicles and a whole host of other technologies where the state of change is likely going to be kind of transportation turning on its head in the next 5 years. So we're kind of getting ready for that in Kelowna, right. And this is one of those examples.
So for a short 15-minute bike ride, roughly what would I pay?
So it's $1 an hour for kind of for trips. So you pay $1, and then for memberships, either annual or monthly, they'll line up a little bit with kind of the $25 a month or $100 a year kind of pricing that we see in Vancouver.
That sounds like really an attractive price. Like, why buy a bike?
Yeah, and even if you do have a bike, you look at the memberships of bike shares in other cities, and 80% of Mobi members in Vancouver actually own their own bike, and they just see a value in that kind of one-way trip. Just that flexibility is really, really important for them.
Well, yeah, one of the biggest hassles when people do ride their bike to work is what to do with their bike. They clamber through the door and put them in some room in the business that may or may not be appreciated by other people, or lock it up and outside. And this way, you ride and you're kind of done.
Absolutely, it's really, really hands off, and it's the same kind of idea where what we have with kind of OGO in our car share. It's you don't have to deal with insurance, you don't have to deal with throwing on your winter tires, you don't have to deal with any of those things. You just use the car for when you need it, and then you've got that kind of ability.
Right. So if there's a problem with all this, I guess we'll find out what that is.
Absolutely, that's what we're trying to figure out.
Right. Matt Worona, thanks very much. Really appreciate that information.
Thanks so much, Ken.
Matt Worona from the City of Kelowna. This is Kent Mulgat for Kelowna Now.